In today's episode of the Beyond Psychology podcast, we're going to talk about why being the smart kid can lead to feeling lost as an adult. This episode explores how intelligence becomes an identity trap, and more importantly, how to break free. Intelligence is meant to be a tool, but for many, it becomes a cage. When your mind is the master instead of the servant, you find yourself trapped behind bars made of the very praise that once felt so good. Let me ask you, have you ever avoided trying something new because you were afraid of not being immediately good at it? That's not just caution. It's the whisper of an identity that's become too fragile to risk being challenged. Let me tell you about Michael. By age 8, he was reading at a high school level. Teachers moved him to advanced classes, and family introduced him as the genius. Michael didn't choose this label, but he learned to embrace it because it brought attention and a sense of being special. For years, this identity served him well. But at 32, despite a prestigious degree and good job, Michael felt paralyzed by indecision, disconnected from others and strangely empty. I should be thriving, he told me, but instead I feel like I'm watching life from behind glass. Michael's story isn't unique. It's the paradox of the smart kid grown up. All the mental tools to succeed, yet feeling fundamentally stuck. Today, we're going to unravel how this happens and map a path toward genuine fulfillment. The problem isn't your intelligence, it's what happened when that intelligence became the operating system for your entire sense of self. When we're young, our identity forms around simple traits and labels. Children naturally latch onto one or two characteristics and incorporate them into their developing sense of self. For some kids, it's being athletic or artistic. For others, it might be being kind or funny. But one of the most powerful labels a child can receive is, "You're smart." This phrase carries weight. It gets reinforced by teachers, parents, and classmates. Each time someone says, "Wow, you're really smart," another brick is added to your identity foundation. And for a while, this feels wonderful. Being the smart kid comes with undeniable advantages. You receive praise, you stand out. School becomes easier. You don't need to study as hard as your peers. You grasp concepts quickly, you become special. But here's where the trap begins to form. What gets praised isn't effort or growth. It's effortless success. You receive attention when you solve problems quickly, when you ace tests without studying, when you understand concepts immediately. And gradually you internalize a dangerous belief. If I'm smart, things should come easily to me. This belief works perfectly in childhood when challenges are simpler. But as life progresses, as tasks become more complex, as the world demands more than raw intelligence, this belief becomes poison. Because now, when something isn't easy, when you struggle with a problem, when you don't immediately understand, when something requires practice, it doesn't just feel like a normal challenge. It feels like evidence that you aren't who you thought you were. It's not just failure, it's identity threat. Psychologist G.R.O.W.S calls this the fixed mindset, the belief that your abilities are static rather than developable. For the former smart kid, this mindset is particularly devastating because their entire self-concept depends on effortless achievement. Imagine your mind whispering, "If I have to try this hard, I must not be as smart as everyone thought. And if I'm not as smart as everyone thought, who am I?" This isn't just self-doubt, it's existential panic. And so begins the avoidance. You don't raise your hand unless you're absolutely certain of the answer. You don't play games unless you know you'll win. You don't pursue new interests that might reveal your limitations. Your world begins to shrink as you stick to familiar territories where success is guaranteed. This is the first prison wall, the narrowing of experience. While others are experimenting, failing, learning, and growing, you're trapped in an increasingly small comfort zone. And the longer this continues, the harder it becomes to break free, because now you have years of avoiding discomfort, years of protecting your image, years of reinforcing this brittle identity. But the narrowing of experience isn't the only cost. There's a second wall being built: isolation. Connection comes from shared experiences, being on a team, working through challenges together, supporting each other through awkward learning phases. But if you're constantly opting out of situations where you might not excel, you're also removing yourself from the very environments where bonds are formed. You don't join the club because you might not be immediately good at it. You avoid the group project because it might expose limitations. You decline social invitations that involve unfamiliar activities. And quietly, gradually, you begin to step outside the flow of social life. But humans need connection. So what do? You lean on what you know, your intelligence. Instead of relating to people, you analyze them. You observe. You theorize. You run simulations in your head about how interactions should go. This creates what psychologists call cognitive empathy, an intellectual understanding of others without emotional engagement. And while it allows you to navigate social situations, it's exhausting. Instead of being present, you're calculating. Instead of connecting, you're performing. Socializing becomes yet another arena where you have to excel. And to avoid failing at it, you begin to avoid it altogether, deepening your isolation. But you're smart, right? You should be able to figure this out. So you apply logic to emotional problems. You try to reason your way to self-worth. You analyze your feelings rather than feeling them. You create arguments to convince yourself you're fine. And none of it works. Because intelligence wasn't designed to heal emotional wounds. It's a tool for solving external problems, not internal ones. There's no intellectual answer to the question, am I enough? That question can only be answered emotionally through experience and connection. Precisely the areas that intelligent children often neglect developing. When the pain of disconnection becomes sharp enough, when the loneliness feels unbearable, that's when the final wall appears. Defensive arrogance. You tell yourself, I'm just different from other people. I don't relate because they're not as deep or intelligent as I am. I'm above superficial connections. This isn't true pride, it's armor. It doesn't come from genuine self-confidence, but from the need to protect yourself from the pain of feeling left out. And it's perhaps the most isolating pattern of all, creating a barrier between you and everyone else. Even when you desperately want connection, this wall prevents you from reaching for it, because true connection requires humility, presence, and vulnerability, qualities that feel threatening when your self-worth is built on appearing exceptional. Take a moment right now. Close your eyes if you can, and remember a time when you avoided trying something new solely because you might not be immediately good at it. Feel that resistance in your chest? That tightness that comes with the thought of being a beginner? That's not your intuition protecting you, it's your identity trying to protect itself. So how do we dismantle these walls? How do we free ourselves from this identity prison? The first step of what I call the G.R.O.W.S framework, and this is non-negotiable, is to grant yourself permission to be a learner again. You must stop identifying primarily as the smart one. You have to let go of intelligence as your primary source of value. Not because being intelligent is bad, but because basing your worth on it is limiting. When your value is tied to effortless success, you'll do everything possible to avoid situations that require struggle. You'll sabotage your own growth to protect an illusion of natural brilliance. Instead, build your identity around growth itself. Stop asking what will make me look intelligent, and start asking what will help me develop. Stop protecting your image and start embracing discomfort. This means deliberately seeking situations where you don't already excel. It means allowing yourself to be a beginner, awkward, uncertain, and imperfect. It means showing up not to demonstrate competence, but to participate in life. Yes, this feels uncomfortable. It may even feel like a step backward, but it's actually the first real step toward becoming whole. The old identity told you that your value came from being exceptional. The new one reminds you that your value comes from being human. And being human means you're allowed to be uncertain. You're allowed to grow slowly. You're allowed to not know what you're doing half the time. Being human means embracing the messiness of real growth rather than the illusion of effortless perfection. The second element of G.R.O.W.S is to reframe your relationship with effort. For many former smart kids, effort feels like failure. If you have to try hard, it means you're not naturally gifted, right? Remember Michael? He once told me, I'd rather not try than try and discover I'm average. This belief kept him in jobs beneath his potential and relationships that didn't challenge him to grow. But this perspective misunderstands what intelligence actually is. True intelligence isn't about knowing everything already. It's about how quickly you can learn, adapt, and grow. And growth requires struggle. It requires pushing beyond your current capabilities. The most fulfilled, successful people aren't those who find everything easy. They're those who embrace challenges as opportunities to develop. They understand that struggle isn't evidence of limitation, but the very mechanism of expansion. So start celebrating effort rather than hiding it. When you find something difficult, instead of thinking, I should already know this, try thinking, I get to learn this. Transform moments of struggle from threats to opportunities. The third component of G.R.O.W.S is to own your failures as growth opportunities. For former smart kids, failure isn't just disappointing, it's devastating, because it threatens their core identity. But here's the truth. Failure isn't evidence of who you are. It's just information about what didn't work. Every significant growth experience involves failure. It's not just normal, it's necessary. The most innovative, successful people in history aren't those who avoided failure. They're those who failed repeatedly and learned from each attempt. Start small. Choose low-stakes situations where failure has minimal consequences. Maybe it's a hobby, a game, or a local class. Put yourself in positions where you can fail safely, and gradually, you'll discover that failure doesn't destroy you. It develops you. The fourth letter in G.R.O.W.S stands for welcome emotions as intelligence. Many former smart kids live primarily in their heads, using analysis as a substitute for feeling. But emotional intelligence is just as crucial as cognitive intelligence for a fulfilled life. Here's what this looks like in practice. When someone asks how you're feeling, instead of immediately responding with thoughts, I think I'm fine because... Pause for 3 seconds. Place a hand on your chest. Notice what's happening in your body before you speak. Are there sensations of tightness, warmth, heaviness? These physical cues are your emotional data, just as valid as your analytical thoughts. Michael started practicing this daily. The first time he truly felt sadness instead of analyzing it, he described it as terrifying, then freeing, like I'd been holding my breath for years without realizing it. This reconnection with your emotional life isn't just about personal well-being. It's also the bridge back to meaningful connections with others. When you can be emotionally present rather than constantly calculating, relationships become genuine rather than performative. The final component of G.R.O.W.S is to shift your definition of value beyond achievement. Your worth as a human being isn't determined by what you accomplish, how smart you are, or what you produce. These things matter, but they're not the foundation of your value. You are valuable because you exist, because you're capable of love, kindness, and connection, because you're part of the human community. This isn't wishful thinking, it's reality. When you truly internalize this truth, the need to constantly prove your intelligence begins to fade. You can still use your cognitive gifts, but they no longer define you. They become tools rather than identity. If you've spent your whole life being the smart one and now feel lost, stuck, or disconnected, know that you're not broken. Your intelligence isn't a curse. The problem isn't your capacity, but the cage you've built around it. And that cage can be dismantled. You can step into a broader identity that embraces all of who you are. Your intelligence, yes, but also your capacity for emotion, connection, growth, and imperfection. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room to belong in it. You just need to be someone who's willing to show up, even when it's hard, even when it's messy, even when you don't have all the answers. And if you can do that, if you can let go of the version of yourself that needs to be above it all, you'll start to feel something you may not have felt in a long time. Connection. Not because you earned it through brilliance, but because you were finally willing to step down from the pedestal and join the rest of us in this beautifully imperfect human experience. And it turns out, that's where the real growth happens. That's where genuine fulfillment lives. That's where you can finally feel at home, not in the isolated realm of perfect intelligence, but in the rich, messy, connected world of being fully human. So if any part of this has resonated with you, if you've recognized yourself in these patterns, know that you're not alone. Many former smart kids are walking the same path of rediscovery. And the first step to changing any pattern is simply naming it. Here's your challenge. This week, try one thing you've been avoiding because you fear not being good at it. Something small, low stakes. Maybe it's a dance class, learning to draw, or speaking up in a meeting about a topic you're not an expert in. As you do, notice the discomfort, name it. This is my identity feeling threatened. And gently proceed anyway. For Michael, it was joining an improv class. The first night was hell, he told me, but by the third week I felt something shift. I started to enjoy the process rather than evaluating the outcome. I laughed at my mistakes instead of being defined by them. 6 months later, he wasn't just more comfortable with imperfection. He'd built genuine friendships through shared vulnerability. Let this be your permission to put down the burden of perfect intelligence. To embrace the freedom of being a learner rather than a knower. To step into the vulnerability of genuine connection rather than the safety of intellectual analysis. Your intelligence is a gift, but it's not all of you. And the sooner you embrace the fullness of your humanity, your capacity for growth, emotion, connection, and yes, even failure, the sooner you'll find your way out of feeling lost. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode.